get full access to RFR only on Patreon. Become a member of the RFR Patreon community to get more Rebel Force Radio. Bonus shows and content are available right now only at patreon.com/Rebel Force Radio.
Penetrated the shield and landed on Endor.
This is where the fun begins.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
This is Rebel Force Radio.
Your source for the Force.
Star Wars news and commentary.
With Jason Swank and Jimmy Mack.
I've seen Star Wars 500 times. Star Wars #1.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Now it's time for Rebel Force Radio.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Well, I got a little pile of loot here. It was my birthday a couple weeks ago, and got a few things. I got a T-shirt that apparently needs some explaining, so we'll be chatting about that. I also have something that needs no explanation, which is a absolutely gorgeous, beautiful set of coasters featuring several of the very iconic Star Wars logos. We've got the Jedi logo from the prequel era. We've got the Imperial cog, the Rebel, I guess the eagle. Is that what they call it? The Rebel eagle symbol. And then I think I've got this is the First Order as well. So it's a little bit from all of the different eras of the Star Wars film franchise. And what a nice gift. You know who sent me that gift? None other than my good friend and yours from Chicago, Jimmy Mack.
That guy, he never thinks of anyone but himself. Except when it's Jason Swank's birthday. And, of course, Jason starts priming me for his birthday. That happens at the end of August. He starts priming me for that toward the end of June. So I definitely know it's coming. But I found something cool for you. Those coasters are made out of tile, and I picked those up at Wizard World Chicago in the Artist Alley. And it was probably about the coolest Star Wars thing I saw at that convention. And it was by a guy. I put his business card in the shipment I sent you. I don't know if you saved the business card.
No, I did have it, and now all of a sudden, the kids were sitting at the desk tonight, and now, things are kind of all around. I did save the card because I wanted to plug the artist.
Yeah, they're these beautiful tile coasters, and they have various Star Wars symbols on them. Of course, as Jason said, the symbol of the Rebel Alliance, the symbol, the Imperial cog, as we know it. Also included is the symbol for the First Order. And what's the fourth one?
The Jedi symbol.
The Jedi symbol. And so they're great little coasters. And Wendy is like, wow, if we retile a bathroom or our kitchen, like our backsplash, we can put one of these in. Like the center tile can be.
What a great idea.
The symbol of the Alliance. So, but these are coasters. They have the rubber stopper on the back so it doesn't slide all over the table. And they're very nice. And so I'm glad you enjoy that for your birthday.
I do.
It's hard to buy Star Wars stuff for a hardcore Star Wars fan. As all of us listening to the show, you're probably the Star Wars guy in your family or workplace or school or circle of friends. And so people sometimes shy away from buying you Star Wars stuff for birthdays, Christmas, what have you, because they think you have it all.
Right.
They think you have it all.
I say, what do you think? I'm Steve Sansweet. I don't have it all. Imagine buying for Steve. I actually, you know what? Speaking of that, I did have I had a great moment. I don't know if I shared this story on the show. Maybe I did back when it happened. This was several years ago, and they were doing a line of action figures called The World of Springfield. They were Simpsons action figures. I think Playmates was doing them, and they were great. I mean, it was one of those. My favorite type of toy line where it's really expansive, every character, obscure, common, all of that. And they did a run of figures that were of famous cameos, guest stars that have been on The Simpsons. And they did one of Mark Hamill. You know, Mark Hamill did the Bodyguard parody episode with Homer. And so it was a Simpsons action figure of not Luke Skywalker, but of Mark Hamill. And there were only 2 on the shelf, and I picked up 2, and I thought, you know, I'm sure Steve has this, but I'm gonna send him an email just to find out, just, you know. And I sent him an email, and to my astonishment, he goes, "No, I don't have that." And I'm like, "Wait, I can give you something you don't have?" This was a big deal. I boxed it up right away and sent it to him. I was so proud. Oh my God, I found something that Steve didn't have.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's made its way on display, but he does have it.
Oh, I'm sure.
So I do like to think that I contributed to Rancho. That was a contribution. And we, Rebel Force Radio, we contributed by way of one of our listeners, a Where's Kitster milk carton.
That's right. Yeah. Still proudly on display at Rancho Obi-Wan.
I believe so. Now, we were asking Where's Kitster before, anyone, before it was cool. And so that sits on the shelf. I am really
Was
happy.
it ever cool? When did it become cool? I don't think it's cool. Hey, by the way, you bring up Rancho Obi-Wan. I do want to let our friends know that tickets are still on sale for the Rancho Obi-Wan annual gala. It's a party you do not want to miss. There are a limited number of tickets still on sale for that event. Go to ranchoobi1.org and be a part of that, because that's a great time.
I was, it's something. It's on my bucket list to go to that gala. I want to do it. It's a difficult time of year, for me traditionally, and so one of these days we're gonna make it. We're gonna make it out there. But I stopped off. It's something that I don't do very often anymore because it does get frustrating. As I stopped off on a little toy run yesterday on the way home from the day job. You know, sometimes you're driving past the exit, where you got the Walmart or the Target coming up, and you just get a feeling. I just had a feeling.
There's a tremor in the force.
Yeah, and I'm looking for that 6-inch Black Series Gamorrean Guard exclusive that Target's got, and I haven't found it anywhere.
Lots of people looking for that one.
Yeah.
I've seen pictures online of certain retail outlets getting a ton of them at once.
Yeah,
and
but nowhere in Ohio, I can tell you that.
Well, you felt the tremor in the force, so you pulled over. And
I pulled over.
What'd you find?
I found absolutely nothing at Target, but I hit the Walmart, and I finally got a single-carded Maz Kanata figure. I'm very happy about this because I passed up that box set that she was in. They did a box set for The Force Awakens. It was her and Rey. I don't know who else was in it, but it's the only way you could get her. And she came with the little trunk, with the Skywalker saber in it. And I saw it, I was just like, it was the only figure I needed out of that whole set. Everything else was a repack. And I said, I bet someday they're going to release a Maz on a single card. I didn't know it was going to take 3 years, but I did finally get it. So I'm happy to add 3 3/4-inch scale Maz Kanata to my collection. This is part of the Force Link 2.0 wave. Have you played around with that new Force Link, by the way, the 2.0 version?
I have not. I don't have any of that stuff going on in my collection. I still don't even have a 3 3/4-inch Han from Solo: A Star Wars Story, and that thing's already out on home video. And I still don't have the action figure. What's wrong with this picture?
What's wrong? It's terrible is what's wrong. Now, you're going to be able to pick it up, the Han Solo figure from, a single-carded Han Solo from the the version as he looked in the Solo movie.
Yeah, those are finally hitting pegs in the vintage collection. Vintage collection. So you're paying an uptick in price for the packaging, and I'm someone who removes the figures from the packaging. So what am I going to do?
You're getting that. No, you're now. Wait a minute. Let's be fair. You're getting the added articulation as well.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense for a guy who stands them all straight up on pegs and is. I don't even like to move to test the articulation. I don't even like to test it because it makes the joints all loosey goosey. I want it mint on card, but mint off card. You know what I'm saying?
Here's the irony. The irony is that what Hasbro tells us is that they got to add various features, and they got to get certain characters out on the pegs for the kids, right? For the kids, they're toys. You got to get them out for the kids. And I buy that, right? Okay, fine. I've got young kids in my house, so not long ago I buy the Qui-Gon and Darth Maul 2-pack for my son Parker. Mm-hmm. And he's 5. Well, he'll be 6 tomorrow, as a matter of... Well, actually, today, as this show is released.
Wow. Happy birthday, Parker.
Yeah. And so I brought it home, popped it out of the package. He's so excited, finally has a Darth Maul with a double-bladed lightsaber. He sticks it in Darth Maul's hand, and the whole hand falls off.
Yeah.
The hand falls out.
You can't even play with this stuff.
You can't, and then he pops that in, and then it breaks at the elbow. I'm not kidding. Then it pops off at the elbow.
Yeah, this is the price you pay for articulation, folks. Toys that are impossible for children to play with. What's wrong with this picture?
There's a lot wrong with it. There's a lot wrong with it. But
I'll tell you what. Let's talk a little bit about what else was in that package I sent you, because I sent you a mysterious T-shirt, a very mysterious T-shirt featuring Chewbacca. So why don't you describe what you're looking at there?
I don't know exactly what I'm looking at. I look maybe it's like an ad for like bubblegum shrimp. Was that? But not bubblegum. Was it Bubba Gum? Bubba Gum.
Bubba Gum. Yeah, got all kind of shrimp, but he's not eating shrimp.
Well, okay, he's eating crawfish or something.
Sir.
So it's Chewbacca. He's standing over a bowl of some sort of shellfish. I'm thinking crayfish, crawfish, whatever. And the bowl is an upside-down R2-D2 dome, which is really clever.
Yeah.
And it says Geeked Con.
Geeked Con. Okay, well, there's your big clue right there.
Okay.
This is a T-shirt sent to us by loyal RFR listener Thomas Avalone. Thomas is obviously from the Louisiana area, Shreveport, Louisiana, which is the home of GeekedCon. GeekedCon launched in 2015 with special guest Peter Mayhew. So Thomas sent us these shirts. He said he saw them for sale at a local Comic-Con, and he knew he had to get a couple for us. He saw these shirts and immediately thought of RFR. The design is inspired by Peter Mayhew's appearance at the very first GeekCon back in 2015 in Shreveport, Louisiana. And Thomas says, I hope you guys find these T-shirts as visually appetizing as Chewbacca seems to find those boiled crawfish. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank Thomas for sending us these cool T-shirts. He says, I've been a listener for many years, back to the Force Gas days. Of course, you guys were the best ever hosts of that show. And I'm putting that in there myself. Thomas didn't say that. Thomas did say, though, I love the show and listen every week. Keep up the good work, and may the force be with you from Northwest Louisiana. And so thank you so much. I have a lot of family in the New Orleans area, and I truly appreciate a little mashup of two of my favorite things, and that's Chewbacca and awesome food from Louisiana, like crawfish. So thank you so much, Thomas.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Jimmy Mack, for these awesome coasters.
Yes.
And had a fine birthday. Looking forward to celebrating the little man's birthday this weekend. But we got a great show for you here, Rebel Force Radio, for September 14th, 2018. Of course, this is the week that Solo premieres on the home video format, the digital download version. I believe we have to wait a little bit later for the physical video or physical media release. I think that is coming out next week,
September 25th.
Oh wow! Oh, so we're getting like a whole 10 days early. That's fantastic. Well, I already pre-ordered mine, so by the time you're listening to this podcast, I will be maybe on an airplane watching Solo, a Star Wars story on the on the iPad. But we've got some coverage of that release. We've got full details of what is going to be included on the disc, as well as very special guest on the show this week, the legendary Star Wars artist Lawrence Noble. He'll be joining us in the cantina. It's always a pleasure to talk to Lawrence. He is a truly Star Wars artist royalty. He's the guy that created one of the most singular, iconic sculptures in all of Star Wars, and that is the famed Yoda statue that is at the front of the right there at the fountain, the Yoda fountain at Lucasfilm. And we'll talk about where all the various casts of that particular Yoda and other work inspired by the work of George Lucas appears, where you can see it. But Lawrence is a great guy. Larry to his friend, so hopefully I can call him Larry.
Oh, you can.
Plus, we got some listener feedback coming up, including, we might as well start. This is a follow-up about the vinyl-caped Jawa. And, Jim, this must have happened with you and Paul, because I don't remember having a conversation with you about the vinyl-caped Jawa.
But we did. Basically, it was me kind of having a conversation to myself where I was.
Where was I? What was going on?
You were probably just half listening, as you always do. But but I was wondering, just thinking out loud. I was like, why did they make that decision to switch from vinyl cape to cloth cape with that original run of action figures back in 1978 that Kenner released with the Jawa? We all know that there was a change made mid-production,
right?
Actually early in production, but not early enough. Some of the vinyl-caped Jawas made it to market, and then it was swiftly replaced with a cloth cloak over the entire plastic action figure.
Yeah.
And I was an ill-fitting cloth cloak too. Let's face it, folks. That thing never fit that poor Jawa very. You could fit two Jawas in there and maybe part of a bantha. But I was wondering, well, why did they make that change? Because they didn't add cloth goods to the vintage Star Wars action figure line until late in the game with Empire Strikes Back. So why the introduction of a cloth cape? Well,
whoa. Oh, okay.
Think about it. Think about it.
All right. Yep. Yoda. Yoda was the first. With
Yoda was the first. But actually, the Jawa was really the first. It was, like I said, originally released with a vinyl cape, like Darth Vader was, and Ben Kenobi and Leia. They had the vinyl capes, and the Jawa was supposed to have a consistent design. But apparently, the switch was made, and this is according to our friend Kevin Lyle, Star Wars artist and entrepreneur. Kevin Lyle, NorseLegion.com is the place to go. Or actually, I think it's just Norse Legion on Facebook. But or look for the Norse Legion at Star Wars conventions, and they have all kind of cool Star Wars merchandise from the mind of crazy Kevin Lyle. And Kevin reached out to me. A lot of people reached out to me, too, and said, hey, they did it for this reason, but I'm going to read Kevin's email. Kevin says, the reason that the Jawa cape is cloth on the initial figure and not on anyone else is because when Kenner initially designed the Jawa with a plastic cape, it was deemed by Kenner as being too cheap, too inexpensive. They wanted all figures to be the same price, and the Jawa figure had to equal the value of the other ones. So basically, it was believed by putting a cloth cloak on the Jawa, it would improve its value to the consumer, which I think is BS. I don't think anyone looked at that Jawa and said, oh, now that's a value right there, because...
Well, it was about equalizing it, because I think we've all thought, look at this Maz Kanata, right? This is supposed to be a 3 3/4 inch action figure. She's like 2.5 inches, right? So why am I paying the same amount of money for this Maz Kanata as I would for, say, a Chewbacca figure that's going to be like a little over 4 inches,
right? But with the Maz Kanata, don't they add then the trunk where she stored Luke's lightsaber? Doesn't that not come with the action figure for added value?
You would think. No,
it doesn't.
No, it just comes with a blaster.
Oh, because
I would love to have the trunk.
Okay, because it did come with the trunk in that initial box set that came out last year.
Yes. That's true, but not on the carded version. But I can understand the thinking of Kenner. They're like, well, wait a minute. This is like, 3/4 of the size of a regular Star Wars figure. So we got to up the ante on the value here so we can justify. What were they when they 99 cents? I think
$1 something.
Yeah. $1 something. So they got to justify the cost. So they're going to throw on the soft goods. They're going to throw on the cloak. Plus, it did look more like the character from the movie when you had the full cloak on rather than just, those kind of weird plastic capes. But your question about why didn't they then start putting, the soft goods on, you had Darth Vader, you had Obi-Wan Kenobi, you had those two that could have easily sported a cloth cape. So why not those as well? And Kevin answers that by saying, well, that would have just cost too much money for Kenner to do that. So they couldn't do it on all of them, so they just chose to do it on the Jawa.
Well, if they even considered that. I mean, I don't know if there was any consideration ever for those initial figures to have any sort of cloth. I think the cloth strictly came from the fact that they believed that consumers would shun the Jawa figure because it didn't have the value of the other figures because it was only half the size. Oddly enough, they didn't have the same hang-ups with R2-D2, which was also a smaller figure. And if you look through history and you think about Jawa releases, in the more modern era of Star Wars collecting with the Power of the Force 2 line, when they did bring the Jawas back 20-something years later and put that figure out on market, they carted two Jawas together. So it was still like, oh my God, we can't sell kids this half an action figure. We better put two of them in there in the pack.
You're right. They did do that, didn't they?
So that's like consistent. This idea that consumers do not want a Jawa action figure individually. There has to be some sort of added value to the Jawa. And it's real funny, in the Netflix series, The Toys That Made Us. Remember that great series?
Oh, yeah.
They do that Star Wars episode, and they feature one of those original Kenner designers, toy designers. And he talks about the fear of presenting the Jawa figure to Lucasfilm before a big meeting, thinking, it just doesn't look right. Even in the prototype era, they were afraid to present a half an action figure. So this guy explains how he used some very clever techniques at his disposal and on his feet, you'll hear in a minute, to add that cloth cape to the Jawa, going way back to even the prototype times when they're actually pitching the line to Lucasfilm. Listen to this, Jason.
Then I realized that, we needed those tiny little Jawas. Oh, teeny! And so I said, I'll do it. Why not? So I truly kit bashed the Jawa, and I had to drape them with desert garb. But then I couldn't find the right fabric. And no matter where I looked around the department, I couldn't find it. But then I looked down at my feet, and I saw I was wearing brown socks. And so I took off my shoes, like I'm doing now, and I cut the sock up, and I put it over the Jawa, and it looked pretty darn good. But, geez, I hope George Lucas doesn't get too close to that. We kept showing that thing with my sticky socks for weeks.
So this Kenner designer from the vintage ages, he needed to create a really quick, hasty Jawa cloak. So he looked down and said, I'm wearing brown socks. Took his stinky sock off, chopped it up, and made the original Jawa cloak.
Oh. What is he saying? Ooh, stinky? Ooh, stinky! Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, you know what? You got to do what you got to do, and with the means that you have at your disposal. I mean, that is smart thinking. That's very smart thinking.
Resourceful.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's get into it. This is a big week. We got Solo hitting the small screen everywhere as we look forward to the digital download.
I have good news for you, my lord.
That's good news. Come closer, I have good news.
All right, that's right. Blu-ray release coming September 25th. We can all enjoy, however, the digital pre-release on September 14th. And usually those digital releases come with a selection of what will eventually be released on the Blu-ray as far as bonus features. And Jim, I don't know how much experience you have with these digital releases that usually come out before the physical media. But one of the things that's nice about it is you might only get a few of the bonus features, but then once the DVD is released or the Blu-ray, those features become available for your download as well.
Oh, I see. So they hold out, and then
some of them they hold out. Yeah. So they'll release the basic ones. A lot of times the director's commentary, if there's one, if there's a big doc that's attached to it, a making of, they'll put that out there with it. But some of the smaller ones they'll hold back, and then once it's all been released, then you'll go back to look at your digital download, and you'll see you've got more of those bonus features available to you. But so big day coming up. Let's go through some of this bonus content. A lot of this sounds very, very interesting. So the first one, the director and the cast roundtable. They must be listening to some Rebel Force Radio to get that idea. Yeah. But Ron Howard sits down with the stars of the film for an intimate and entertaining discussion of the film's making. Now, that ought to be really interesting. When I saw this, I said, okay, there's some transparency here because, Jim, as we know, Rogue One, the making of that film, as well as strangely enough, the making of The Force Awakens, a lot of that was very hush-hush. With Force Awakens, you had the situation with Harrison Ford, the accident. With Rogue One, you had the displacement there at the end of Gareth Edwards and bringing on, his name just left my head. Who came in and saved the day?
Tony Gilroy.
Yes, Tony Gilroy. I was thinking of Henry Gilroy. No relation, by the way, I believe. Tony Gilroy. So even though the Solo has had its fair share of controversy there in the early days with the Lord Miller firing, you're still going to get a sit down with Ron Howard and all the stars talking about making the movie. So I guess they can control that. They're not going to say. He's not going to say, so what did you guys think when I came in and Miller and Lord were fired? I don't think he's going to lead with that question. But.
No. How difficult was it really working with those? No, they're not even going to be mentioned. It's going to keep it really straightforward, and it'll stick to their experiences on the set working together. And there's going to be no mention made of any sort of the controversy and displacement of the two original directors for Solo, Lord and Miller. So none of that stuff's going to be there. It's going to be probably entertaining. I mean, Ron Howard always is a very likable guy, and a round table. Do you think Ron Howard's going to end the round table by saying "puff a pig"? Not in this episode. I doubt it, but maybe he will.
We'll hold out some hope. They also have a video on there called Team Chewie. Where we'll see what it takes to bring your favorite Wookiee to life in this lighthearted look behind the scenes. I'm kind of wondering if this is a little bit like that R2-D2 Behind the Dome or the Dome documentary.
No.
You remember that?
Yes, I do.
This is going to be?
That was what you call a mockumentary, okay?
Right.
R2 Behind the Dome, yeah. Look that one up if you could find it. That's actually hilarious.
I've got the DVD of that.
Yeah, so do I. Can you believe we have DVDs of that? It's almost fan film-esque. It's like a fan film made by guys who worked on the prequels.
Yeah.
And so they create. I think it was Don Bees who really spearheaded that mockumentary. But no, this is not anything silly like that. This is Team Chewie. This is where you get guys who worked behind the scenes on the movie talking about how they bring Chewie to life. And something that's really important about Chewie is his vocabulary, his voice. And the voice is always provided by the audio wizards at Skywalker Sound, starting back in the old days with Ben Burt himself. And here we fast forward to the year 2018, and we talk to the next generation of sound wizardry coming out of Marin County. And here we hear from Skywalker Sound's Tim Nielsen, and he explains how he and his team went looking for new sounds to add to Chewie's vocabulary.
The main recording of Chewbacca is a bear that Ben Burt, the original sound designer, recorded many, many years ago. But because the original bear only made so many sounds, Chewbacca's vocabulary has always been a little bit limited. So we spent an afternoon recording this massive grizzly bear who was just hungry all the time. And if you would simply show him food, he got very excited. And if you didn't give him the food right away, he would let you know. So we were able to get a really quite extensive palette of new bear vocals. And we also recorded quite a few other animals, deep guttural pieces that were used occasionally in the giant roar for Chewbacca. That were not in the exact range as Chewbacca, but with a little bit of manipulation, I was able to create a new set of Chewbacca sounds.
That's interesting. To me, I find that very interesting as a guy who produced the live audio dramas in the Smuggler series at Star Wars Celebration. Chewbacca always played a big role in those productions, and I found myself in that situation saying, boy, I wish I had a little more variety with some of these sounds. There's only so much I can do with the editing, blending together some of these sounds. You know, I really should go out to the zoo and hook up with a bear and put a microphone in his face and
do what?
It's because like Kyle would put stuff in the Smuggler script that would be like, Chewie says, "What's up?" And I'd be like, "What's up?" Like, "What's up?" And so I'd be like, "Oh, how am I going to do this?" Now, I just made up that example. Kyle did not put "What's up" for Chewie in any script. I don't want to throw that out there, okay? Because people will be like, "You did what?" But it was like something along those lines. I had to build a vocabulary for Chewie myself based on the existing sounds at my disposal. And at times I found that to be rather limiting. And so with Chewie playing such a major role in this latest Star Wars film, Solo, obviously the sound guys had to expand on that vocabulary. You can't just go back to the original audio that Ben created for the original trilogy. You have to build upon that. And everything that we've seen, well, except for the holiday special. The holiday special had some very unique Wookiee sounds. But when you deal with things like Chewie's return in Revenge of the Sith, you're still dealing with a lot of those original recordings that were created for Chewie.
Yep.
And then so now he's back. It's hard to break down things that were going on in The Last Jedi. Chewie was limited, and even in The Force Awakens, he did have a bit more screen time, but still nothing to where it could compete with the amount of screen time he has in Solo. And one of my favorite elements of Solo is just the mere fact that there is so much Chewbacca in that film. And so because of that, they had to create new Chewbacca sounds. So they went even beyond the bears. They were recording walruses and stuff. And so, and just working with that to make it all sound consistently Chewie. So good job to Tim Nielsen and the Wizards.
Great job. Do you, by the way, have any idea how many approximately Chewie sounds there are for the original trilogy?
No. I mean, I guess we could build a spreadsheet of that. You know,
I was just curious how many, and if there were, individual elements that went into, how many combos there are, how many unique sounds. Until I heard this, I'd never really thought about it. I never really thought about what it would be like to have to, Because you play the video games or you watch the Lego specials, and it's all recycled material, and you can almost go, oh yeah, that's from that moment when.
Right. Yep.
And that happens a lot with R2-D2 as well. R2 has a similar situation. So this idea of, oh my gosh, well, we need new original Chewie sounds. It's tough to do when even those growls are things that we could repeat in our sleep.
Sure. Yeah.
It's like a song. Yeah.
And how many times do they do? All right, man on the street, do your best Chewbacca impersonation. It always sounds like a gargling, mouthwash.
My favorite's still I think it's either the police training or the police academy training, or it's military training, and it's a video of a guy getting tased. They have to do that. It's part of the the initiation. They can't tase anybody unless you know what it's like to be tased. And the guy gets tased, and he's like, and the guys are speaking Spanish, and all you hear is like, yeah, Chewbacca.
No, tase it.
Apparently, Chewbacca in Spanish is Chewbacca.
And Chewie,
it's on YouTube.
You often hear Chewie being used in, as a sort of Spanish nickname, in Spanish speaking, terms. Chewie, Chuy, yeah, Chewie, Chewie. That's kind of like that's a nickname. I don't know what that means actually. Chewie in Espanol is something you see quite often.
Yeah. Well, obviously in this video too, Jonas is going to take a big center stage as the new inhabitor of the Chewbacca costume, and he is Chewbacca now. So that ought to be. I'm looking forward to that. That should be real good as well. Let's see.
Chewy, by the way, according to the Urban Dictionary, Chuy is a Mexican way of saying Jesus. So there, now you know.
All right.
So if you hear someone being called Chewy, you can, with confidence, say, hello, my friend Jesus. And he will buy you a cold cerveza. Because, of course, beer is a recurring theme on this week's show.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. All right, Kasdan on Kasdan. You got Lawrence Kasdan and his son Jonathan chatting about what it was like to write the movie script together. Should be interesting. Remaking the Millennium Falcon, where we get to track the transformation of the most famous hunk in the galaxy from, oh, wait a minute, what is this? From Lando's swank and impeccable pride and joy to Han's stripped-down hot rod freighter with, quote, special modifications. I like Lando's swank and impeccable pride and joy. I like that.
They use your last name as an
adjective.
Adjective to working with Lando style. So the last name Swank. So here's what we've learned so far. Chewy is another way of saying Jesus, and Swank is another way of saying style. Lando style. I like it.
You got it. I always loved in. You remember the Bill Murray movie Scrooged?
Yes.
And his last name in the movie was Cross. And in his office, he had like the Webster's Dictionary definition of cross, and it was like spelled phonetically and everything. And the definition was a thing they hang people on.
Okay.
And I always wanted that for my office. I always wanted to say swank, and then the definition, which was ostentatiously fashionable. If you look up swank in the dictionary, I always thought that was a
nice.
They have that hanging up in the office.
I'll tell you, ostentation. What did you say it was?
Ostentatiously fashionable.
Ostentatiously fashionable. I don't think I've done anything ostentatiously in my life. I can even barely say that word. But,
you have done ostentatious things. You can be quite an ostentatious fellow.
Oh, characterized by vulgar or pretentious display. Oh, okay. All right, yeah. Let's move on. Swank.
All right. Escape from Karelia. Get behind the wheel for the making of this high-octane chase through the streets of Karelia. Well, that opening scene, which was kind of Bond-like a little bit. This wouldn't be the opening chase. This would be once they've escaped Lady Proxima's clutches, right? That was the real chase.
I'm glad you brought up the Bond connection with Solo, because something I've been wanting to say on the show a long time is the thing that attracts me to the character of Kira more than anything is that she could be a Bond girl. And I think that's the first time in Star Wars we're actually seeing that. Someone who actually could be a Bond girl. So, someone who the lead character is obviously affectionate for and has a connection with, but also someone who can understand the lead character and work with that character and stand up for herself and still look absolutely beautiful while doing it. And all of those things, to me, define Kira. And I think that's one of the things that I find most instantly attractive about her character is the fact that she does check off a lot of the boxes of things that make a great Bond girl, with the capability to spare and the ability to match wits with Bond. In this instance, Kira matching wits with Solo. It works on so many great levels.
It really does. It really does. And, as we talked about last week on the show, as we were breaking down some of the things that the novelization reveals, there's a lot more to Kira's character than what we even see on screen. And I thought what we saw on screen was really compelling stuff. But there's a lot more going on behind those eyes, those beautiful eyes of hers. And and Jim, you put kind of the thing I like about what you said is the ability to understand the lead character. And those are always the best Bond girls, were the ones that, probably the best Bond girl, in my opinion, as far as the way you define, there's the most beautiful, there's maybe the most action adventure oriented, but truly the one that I thought really matched toe to toe with Bond was Ava Green in Casino Royale.
Great example, and very much in line with a lot of the characteristics we get from Kira.
Yeah, right.
Someone who matches wits with Bond. Kira matches wits with Solo. Someone Bond is attracted to, and likewise. But yet there's still something tenuous there that isn't really within Bond's possession, so to speak. Same thing with the relationship with Han and Kira. There's a chemistry there, and there's obvious feelings for each other, but there's something about her.
Well, and who has the upper hand? I mean, you realize that throughout all of this, that Kira, once she follows and becomes under the tutelage of Dryden, then she really has the upper hand. She really has a leg up on Han, and she's kind of, whether he realizes it or not, kind of pulling the strings a bit, much like the Vesper character in Casino Royale.
Right. But also another consistency between those two characters, Vesper and Kira, is that neither of them can escape from the life that they're living. Han is looking to bolt from his servitude to the Lady Proxima gang, and then any sort of debt he might owe Dryden Voss or the Crimson Sun, he's looking to avoid all of that stuff. And he has the ability to escape from. Even that comes up in the dialogue with Han and Beckett, where Han says, "They don't know me. They don't know me. I can get in and get out." And that's the whole thing about Han Solo. He can get in and get out. He has that element of freedom. He is the only free spirit that exists within the Imperial realm. At least the only one that we've been shown. Everyone else is locked into these roles of either being the oppressor or the oppressee in this terrible existence that these people live in under Imperial rule. But Han Solo somehow is able to skate around all of that stuff and rise above it all. He has an amount of freedom that Kira will never understand. And that's what makes Han. That's what makes him special, really, is the fact that he's able to rise above the oppression and still be a free spirit.
We also have the train heist. So there's a little piece about the making of that incredible sequence. Also, becoming a droid, L337. Meet the newest droid and the talented actor who helps bring her to life. So lover or hater, L337 is going to get her own little featurette there. Scoundrels, droids, creatures, and cards. Welcome to Fort. How do you pronounce this?
Ipso.
Okay. All right. Take an in-depth tour of the rough and tumble bar where strangers mix and gamblers risk, all in the legendary card game Sabacc. So we'll have a little, perhaps an in-depth look at some of the things that might just go by in a flash. Some of those creatures. This is sort of the cantina moment, but not unlike what we saw with Force Awakens and Maz Castle, Jim. It goes by so fast. You don't really get a chance to rest on them like you did in Jabba's palace and, of course, in the cantina.
Mm-hmm. I feel like we got to know our environments a little bit better in Solo. But the one thing that was really, to me, kind of a distraction in trying to look in the corners of all these, of each and every frame that appears on the screen, like I do traditionally with all Star Wars films, is just the overall amount of shadow that is involved in this movie. This is a very dark film as far as the way it's shot, and that's inconsistent with a lot of the Star Wars films we've seen prior. And I have a hard time getting over that because I want to pick out every little bit of detail in all of these scenes. And there are times I feel like Solo is way too much in the shadows. And they go into it a lot on the Blu-ray, and they pat themselves on the back about how dark they made the whole thing and how they, didn't use direct lighting a lot of times and relied on a lot of the lighting from the props itself on the set. Lamps and stuff like that. And that was all done by design. They were being, they weren't being, they weren't blowing anything off. But at the same time, I feel like there is a look to certain Star Wars films. And I'm not saying Solo didn't have that look, but there was just something too dark about a lot of sequences. But, you can look at it a whole bunch of different ways. You can just say, well, that's the darkness rising up in the galaxy, my friend. But
sure, it could have some sort of symbolic.
Yes.
Yeah, it might. But I'm with you, and that is frustrating. I'll tell you, with films that are done that have that sort of darkness about them, because I consume so much entertainment now on an iPad, an iPhone, on the go. I'm constantly playing with the contrast of the screen to try to bring up some detail. In a completely dark movie theater, it's a little easier. But if you're driving to work like I am, trying to watch a little TV,
putting your life at risk like I am for entertainment. That's something I got to say to everyone listening to the show. Okay. Sure, we sit around and we watch movies and television shows, and we talk about it on this podcast for your enjoyment. But Jason takes it one step further. When he's watching and consuming his pop culture, he's actually on the road and staring at a screen when he needs to be, have his hands at the 10 and 2 position on that steering wheel and pay. But so he is risking his life to consume pop culture. So he'll be able to talk to me about it on the show, and that's it.
No sacrifice is too much.
He's put his life at risk, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. So let's talk more about this DVD you will be watching on various interstates in the Ohio area.
Yeah, into the maelstrom, the Kessel Run. Han and Chewie at the controls of the Falcon. See how this legendary moment in Star Wars history unfolds. So a whole bit about that. The Kessel Run, I got to tell you, not unlike the story we had last week about kind of the lack of the life debt plot that was missing from the novelization and the film proper, really. It was something that was sort of glossed over, and we thought that we might get a little bit more detail about it in the novel. And the novel it's kind of like, well, Chewie didn't have much better to do, and he thought that he might be able to help make Han a nicer guy, a better person. So he decided to just hang with him for a while. Not quite what we had sort of all, those of us going back 40 years, sort of envisioned for the thing that brought them together. Also, the Kessel Run. Did it live up to the expectations? I got to tell you, I thought that the Kessel Run was an actual race. I thought it was going to be like the pod race that we saw in episode 1, more formal kind of thing rather than, more of an informal escape.
It earns its name because it's a specific path you have to take to get to the planet Kessel. There's only one way to get there. And so if you veer off course, you're going into, holy hell. It's like, driving on the 101 in L.A. and all of a sudden you pull off the expressway and you're in some kind of neighborhood. You don't know where you're at. So that's what we have going on here with the Kessel Run. You have to stay on course. And I like that because that's a little bit of consistency with the expanded universe. In Kevin J. Anderson's trilogy, the Jedi Academy trilogy, it maps out what's going on with the course into Kessel. And Kessel, in the expanded universe, it was surrounded by a bunch of space anomalies, like black holes and things like that. Here we have a much more cinematically satisfying trip through the Kessel, the course to get to Kessel, because you have all this crazy, not just black holes. You have holy hell going on, big monsters and all sort of terrible supernovas you could fly right into, end your trip real quick. So I liked what I saw from the Kessel Run, and I like the fact that it could be navigated the way Han did it. Here we hear from Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who played L3, and she talks about what it was like to be on the set in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. What you have to understand is that they used high-def projection of space outside of the cockpit. So it wasn't your traditional blue screen where they're going to lay on the effects afterwards. The actors and filmmakers were actually being exposed to what we're going to see in the movie. It was incredible technology. So they wrapped the cockpit around on the exterior with these high-def screens. And so you see the Falcon flying through hyperspace in real time, and it's being captured on camera. And when they actually pull the lever to make the Falcon jump into light speed, the actors and cameramen and everyone, they see it happening in real time on the set. And so Phoebe talks a little bit about this, about the first time. They didn't tell the actors that this was going to happen either. They wanted to film their legitimate response to the Falcon jumping to hyperspace. And so you hear Phoebe talking about it, and if you listen closely, you'll hear that moment when they actually do make the jump to light speed, and you'll hear the actors react in such a way that is not part of the script. So here's Phoebe Waller-Bridge from the new Solo Blu-ray on stands today, available today. Well, no, not the Blu-ray, but the digital release. And here's Phoebe talking about making that jump to light speed.
Going into hyperspace was probably the coolest moment. You know you're an adult, you know it's not real, but we pressed this lever, and then the stars came, and we both just went, ah!
Honestly, when you laughed?
For a second, I really believed I was going into hyperspace.
Mm-hmm.
So you hear them going, whoa! I mean, they really were just, blown away by that moment. So something to look for, yeah.
Well, and then Millennium Falcon from Page to Park. This is a bonus feature that's going to be available with a digital code with the Target release. That's another thing, by the way. If you live in that world of Apple and iTunes, you may want to consider getting your digital release via Apple, via iTunes, because oftentimes they get the exclusive Target bonus features that are added later. Just throwing that out there. That's been my observation. But this is one where you can look at the history of the most famous hunk of junk in the galaxy, its origin and development, and how it will translate into one of the most anticipated expansions in Disneyland's history. So that's going to be a big, big deal as we trace the history of the Millennium Falcon from the page in the script to the Disneyland park.
And I'm sure they're going to be using that similar technology that they used on the shooting set, where we'll actually see the Falcon make that jump to light speed via the screens outside. I think there's going to be a lot of crossover in the technology we see to create these films to the technology that we'll actually be able to experience ourselves in the theme parks. So I think that's the coolest thing, quite honestly.
Oh,
I mean, talk about really being in the movie.
It's going to put you right there. The deleted scenes, that's always something very exciting for us Star Wars fans to see what was left on the cutting room floor. Several are going to be released with the home video, including Proxima's Den. We know from the novelization that there was quite a bit more about Proxima, the Fagin of the Star Wars galaxy, to Oliver Twist. To Han Solo's Oliver Twist. Mm-hmm. So some more details there. That's another one. Jim, that whole sequence is so dark, you can hardly tell what's going on in there. And I know that's part of the drama. That's part of the look. But, I really want to look around in there and see a little bit more of what Han was, sort of the conditions which Han was growing up, the conditions that shaped him. So maybe we'll learn a little bit more in Proxima's Den. The Karelian foot chase. So I'm guessing this is part of the big escape that maybe was cut out.
Yeah, I saw a little bit of this. It was released online, and you see Han and Kira. They're hiding from Proxima's goons. They're out on the run, and they jump into some containers featuring weird amphibious creatures in water. It's So it's a fun sequence. It's fun. It feels like
wait. You said amphibious creatures, like
it's like weird,
like frogs or Gungans or what?
I don't know what. I don't like. No, more like I don't know. I couldn't describe. Like snakes is more what I'm.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, that's cool.
I think that's what they were. I just glimpsed at the deleted scene. I haven't really sat down and taken in this entire digital release. Next week, we'll be diving deep into the Solo DVD. But this week, we're still skimming the surface, and we don't want to spoil it all for you because it's just released today as this show comes out. But we do have a few other deleted scenes on the Blu-ray. Battle of Mimban, Han versus Chewie, their famous meeting there in the mud. Snowball fight, which I actually have seen some glimpses of, a humorous moment with Han and Chewie in the snow. Meet Dryden Extended and Coaxium Double Cross. But we do have a clip here from Han Solo Imperial Cadet. I think a lot of us were watching this film going, well, they kind of glossed over Han's career in the Empire.
That's right.
According to Expanded Universe legend, Han was a TIE pilot in the Imperial Academy. And we never see that in the film. Well, thanks to Han Solo Imperial Cadet, we actually do get to see this sequence of Han recklessly flying a TIE fighter. And he's oddly, he's not wearing your typical TIE pilot helmet. He's wearing one where you can actually see his face, give him the star helmet, So, but I mean, obviously, you want to see that it's Alden as Han in there, and so he runs into some problems, and he is told to eject from his TIE fighter. Instead, he crash lands his TIE fighter into the hangar of an Imperial cruiser. The Imperial cruiser, by the way, is based on a Colin Cantwell design. Colin Cantwell was the original. Even, I think prior to Ralph McQuarrie, maybe not, or, around the same time as Ralph, Colin was brought in and he created 3D models of some of the things that we would eventually see in Star Wars, like the TIE Fighter, the Death Star, and one of his designs was for an Imperial cruiser. All of his designs look vastly different from what we see in the final film, but Colin's original design for the Imperial cruiser is included in this deleted scene from Solo, Han Solo Imperial Cadet. The ship he is crash landing into, the hangar of, is that Colin Cantwell design, which I thought was really cool. So here we're going to hear a quick deleted scene. Here's audio from that scene, Han Solo Imperial Cadet. He's in front of the Imperial Tribunal trying to explain his way out of ignoring orders. That's what the big problem is. They wanted him to eject, and instead he crash landed on the hangar. So here he is being read the riot act.
Cadet Solo, still can't decide if you're brave or stupid.
Well, I'd like to think I'm a little of both, sir. Moff. Sir Moff.
It's Commodore. And if you think smartass is the way to go here, you're sorely mistaken.
Commodore. Fellow Imperials, if you'll allow me. Onyx 2 was flanked by headhunters. If I'd followed Command's directive and returned to formation instead of going after him, he'd be dead now.
No place for maverick heroics in his Emperor's Navy.
I'm not trying to be a hero, Commodore. Trust me.
Well, congratulations. You're not one.
Now, just listening to that, I hear so much Harrison Ford in that performance from Alden Ehrenreich.
And no question.
And what's weird is that after seeing the movie several times now at this point, I find it odd that there's this deleted scene that really strikes me as being Alden doing dead on Harrison, and in a deleted scene. So I think Alden does a stand-up job as playing a young Han Solo character throughout the whole film. But man, does that jump out to me as some real Harrison Ford, Han Solo, vintage hubris and attitude and arrogance, just smart ass, as the Imperial says, smart ass. And that's the Han Solo that I know and love, quite honestly.
Yeah. I got to tell you, the more time I spend with this movie and Alden's performance, and the sadder I am that it sort of got the bum rap that it did. I hope that we, all kinds of crazy things happen in the world of entertainment now. You've got shows that are being revived that you never thought would be revived, the prevalence of streaming services and getting movies and TV shows in front of eyes that otherwise wouldn't have seen them. I'm just hoping that this movie eventually gets its due, because I think there's just a whole world of stories that could have been told with these actors and these characters, and I want to believe. I'm going to go out and say I want to believe that we might see another Solo movie. I really, really thought this was a fun, great installment into Star Wars canon. Well, and you can like L3, you can not like L3, you can like Alden, you cannot like Alden, whatever the case is. But I really do think it's an absolute, very, very worthy installment. I really do.
Well, media
and you would think that it would have been the perfect antidote to those that were less than satisfied with The Last Jedi.
Maybe the medicine was served a little too quickly.
Too soon. Too soon.
But
the wounds were still very fresh. And there's that aspect of, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. once bitten, twice shy. Throw in your, whatever cliche you want. I think that you're absolutely right, Jim. It was a little bit too soon. They hadn't diagnosed the problem before they tried to introduce the cure.
Right. Well put. And I mean, look at the way that pop culture franchises and media gets resuscitated. How many times was Family Guy canceled before it really got its footing?
Yeah, right.
And, and it kept getting resuscitated by reruns on Comedy Central. All of a sudden, Fox is like, what are we doing canceling this thing? Well, history could repeat itself here as far as bringing new life into something from a franchise. And I think Solo is going to catch on a little bit more with this home video release. I think a streaming release is going to benefit it more, cable, et cetera. And then it'll begin to grow on people more and more. For everyone I know who's seen it, liked it, Alden or not, I quite honestly, I haven't heard too many criticisms of Alden either. So.
I haven't either. I have not either. Yeah.
Really,
the only criticism I get out of it, well, it's not Harrison Ford.
Well, yeah. I mean, okay.
Well,
yeah. Well, neither am I.
Who is? Yeah. Who is?
So, if you're one of those rare people listening to this show who hasn't seen Solo yet, go ahead and jump on board. I think you'll be really satisfied as a Star Wars fan.
This is Jeremy Bullock. You're listening to Rebel Force Radio, your source for the Force and also beer.
If you've got the time, we've got the beer.
Boba beer.
Okay, if you don't want a gift, at least let me buy you a beer or lunch or something.
When Han Solo returns to the Death Star in the Millennium Falcon and shoots down the TIE fighters and saves the rebel cause, do you think he does so for a free beer?
Boba beer, best in the galaxy. Boba beer, bubbling bounty. Boba beer, best in the galaxy. Boba beer, bubbling bounty.
Boba beer, a full pint. Boba beer, a full pint.
Boba beer, Boba beer.
Boba beer, it's worth a lot to me.
All right. Well, I'm thirsty. I don't know about you. I'm ready to jump in the cantina. And like I said, we have a very special guest this week. We haven't talked to him in a while on the podcast. So we're thrilled to welcome once again Lawrence Noble.
Star Wars Cantina.
Where are you going, Master?
For a drink.
Sorry about the mess.
You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. We must be cautious.
Hello?
All right.
Oh, my God, I hear everyone.
Gosh.
We're here. The gang's all here.
And the drummer just got out of jail, man. So we can do the tour like it's planned.
Why is it the drummer that always holds us up from our next gig? We're always bailing that guy out.
That's life, pal. That's how it works.
Every drummer that I ever knew that didn't graduate to playing bass always ended up in jail. And I don't know why that is. I think they just get to a point where they get so frustrated with the limitations of hitting things that they decide to pick up another instrument or just start beating people. It's a very weird thing.
I think it's a bass issue. They go to bass. Bass is in jail. But
yeah.
Aren't we all? I mean, really, aren't we all serving time? That's the planet. That's the planet. That's how this planet works, man.
Yeah. We're all serving someone. Were you in Japan? Did we talk to you when you were living in Japan?
No, he wasn't living there.
He wasn't.
No.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't living in Japan.
But we went to Japan.
You did go to Japan. I saw you there.
That's what I said.
So, and we were all together. I don't know if it was with Jeremy Bullock at that steakhouse because no one could, continue eating Japanese food, and we needed to find some American food.
Yeah, Tony Roma's.
Tony Roma's.
Yes.
And Jeremy Bullock was at the bar when we walked in, and we all had a little taste of American food. And nothing against Japanese food. I love Japanese. It's my favorite food, except if I'm in Japan and they do it a little bit. You know what I mean?
So Jeremy was Jeremy was there. I didn't make that trip. That was I think that was the first time that Larry, that you met Jimmy Mack, right? Was in Japan.
Yes.
No, was it? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Far be it from me. But Jason, you were missed, and we did talk.
We talked about you a lot.
But mostly good. Mostly good.
Mostly. Luckily, I did catch up with you. At least one other time, maybe a couple other times at the conventions. I know the year that when you were doing the live sculpting of the Ben Kenobi bust.
Yeah.
I remember catching up with you there. You know, I am looking at, by the way, a several page spread in the latest issue of the Star Wars Insider magazine. And you're like the centerfold in it.
I am. Burt Reynolds, Lawrence Noble. But you know what? Thank you, Mark Wright. Thank you, Chris Cooper. I mean, I was expecting, seriously, maybe a half a page article with maybe a photograph. And then I just bared my guts out to Mark Wright, and I told him my whole story. And evidently it had effect. And I'm so pleased. I could not be more honored. I couldn't be more pleased, because that, in a way, is an introduction to a family I already love. You know, I mean, we're all in that Star Wars family. Even if right now we're at Thanksgiving dinner and some difficulties happening, we're all in that, we're all in that Star Wars family.
Yes.
And that's important. It's important to realize, to recognize, and to appreciate. And I'm grateful for it, man. That was a sweet article. They had nothing. It's amazing, because they sent me the copy to review, and I held the pencil tightly, but I couldn't find anything. It was like they got all the facts straight and correct and true, and it's like, had I found something, I would have corrected it, because I want the fans to know who the real Lawrence Noble is.
I think it comes through beautifully. And I have to say, Larry, we've been privileged over the years as Star Wars podcasters to have you on the show several times. And you're so well known for, perhaps maybe the most iconic Star Wars sculpture in the history of the fandom. But as far as knowing your story, the thing that jumped out at me in reading the article is like, wow, Larry was like a Star Wars super fan before it was cool to be a Star Wars super fan.
Well, I've always been not cool. So
that's impossible.
Hey, you know what? I've followed my passion. And I think sometimes that's cool and sometimes that's nerdy. And a lot of times it's both. But at the same time, it's who I am and what I felt and what I know and how I was moved, really, by George's vision. I mean, he put it out there, and he had some bites. He not only got a bite from me, I mean, I swallowed the whole hook, and it was treble. I mean, it was like, oh, my God, I'm hooked on this now. And then when I saw Empire Strikes Back and I saw Yoda, there was a psychic connection that I don't know how to describe. It was almost like Yoda came off the screen and said, turned away from the film and looked right at me and said, and now it's time to sculpt. And I did it. I did it. It was like, that was my destiny. That's where I needed to go. George knew it. Yoda knew it. and the only one who didn't was me, and that
Wow.
was the inspiration. And it hooked me line and sinker, man. It just was where I lived, what I felt, and it was all that love I had for Kelly Frias and Robert Heinlein and the militaristic kind of science fiction writers that also had some message in their novels and art, and it just hooked me. It was like,
well,
I've been waiting for this.
You saw a New Hope in the theaters, and then, according to the story, you actually ended up being able to pitch a poster idea for The Empire Strikes Back. Is that true?
I did. I was.
Yeah.
Well, I had a connection with Sid Ganis, who was, when I met him, he was the marketing director at Warner Brothers. And I worked on a film called Time After Time with Sidney. And evidently, he didn't feel like I dropped the hook. He felt like maybe I came through. And I lobbied my agent, John Steinberg. I lobbied him hard. I said, go to Lucasfilm. I have to be involved with this picture. And you picture this. It's like Lawrence Noble, Don Alvin, having a beer at a barbecue and taking a swig of the beer and saying, how do we get involved with George Lucas and his vision and let him know that we're not trying to get on the bandwagon. And he took a sip, thought about it, handed me the beer. I took a sip, and I said, I don't know. But it happened.
Well, beer is a recurring theme on our show, and I thought you were going to be hit with some sort of bolt of inspiration. Do you remember what kind of beer it was?
Yeah, it was a Coors Regular.
Coors, the most uninspirational beer an artist can drink. But
well, I had a friend who tried to get me on these IPAs and the other beers, and he says, you know what? Real friends don't let friends drink Coors. And this is what I've drunk for. This is what I have drunk for my career.
Hey, say it loud.
Why
say it
would
proud.
I give up?
That's a real guy's beer. A Coors, that's a blue collar beer right there. But it's not a very inspirational beer, as we've learned. So you and John Alvin, though.
Ask Sam Elliott. I'm not going to go up against Sam.
The banquet beer, Coors. The banquet beer.
It's like that guy endorsed it. It was Paul Newman's favorite beer.
There you go. So, hey, no knock on Coors, okay? If I had a Coors in front of me right now, I'd drink 12 of them. But so you and John Alvin, obviously, John also became well-known as someone who contributed artwork to the Star Wars pantheon, like yourself. And you guys saw the film together, and you had a beer and said, we're going to get involved in this thing.
We are. And I did. And we did. And John and I, we were best friends for 32 years. And so we had a lot to share. And we shared so much of the Star Wars story. We would conject, oh, this is going to happen. This could happen. What if this happened? And we just shared it like, I don't know. Like you'd share bonbons or something. But it was a wonderful connection with an incredible artist. There's certainly been other incredible artists involved with Star Wars. John wasn't the only one. Drew, of course, is, the cat's meow.
Drew Struzan, of course, yeah.
Other artists, and Brian Rood and Mark Ratz. They're taking their place in the panorama, and it's up to us, the old guys. I'm not old, really.
No.
Old in.
Hey, if you're getting old, we're getting old, so nobody's getting old around here.
Well, no, right. Not in my house.
Right.
But aside from that, we do need to let the young ones know that we care. And if we can pass that passion on to them, then we've got a family of substance that just will not be denied. And I talk about the family. It's the Star Wars family, man. I mean, I have these fears. It doesn't everybody. But I have a fear that one day the faction of Star Wars fans that doesn't like The Last Jedi topples my Yoda.
Oh, no,
and it's
no.
Like, you have gone to.
Oh, I don't think they would ever do that because Yoda is a unifying symbol. He's not a divisive symbol. In fact, even the people that, don't care for The Last Jedi, many of them speak very lovingly about Yoda's appearance in the film. That was one of the things that they liked the most. So I don't see that as I think that we need more Yoda. Star Wars always needs more Yoda.
I'm neurotic. I'll be the first one to admit that. maybe there's a whole group, but I'm definitely the first one to admit that. It's just, and you know what? I don't think you get anywhere in art without being heavily critical of what it is you're producing. And I think delusional is easy. It's like, well, I'm the greatest artist since Rodin. I mean,
yeah.
There are those that would differ, and I don't think I'm the best artist in the world. That's for sure. But I'll tell you this, and this is just Lawrence's confidence speaking. I'm one of the best.
Yes.
There's no question.
Perfect. Hey, and all anyone has to do to verify that is just take a look at your Yoda sculpture. It truly is awesome, awe-inspiring, and the most lifelike reproduction of Yoda I've ever seen. And is it true that Yoda, that sculpture, was the first piece of Star Wars artwork you ever did?
It wasn't the first piece. It was the first piece of three-dimensional.
Okay, so it was your first sculpture.
Yes.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
But not the Yoda fountain Yoda. That came later. But that the collectible, the little 8-inch tall figure I did for Karelian Enterprises. That was the first sculpture I ever did.
Right. Okay, and that was produced commercially, a limited edition. A little bronze statuette of it was available, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't have one in my collection because they're going for about 10 to 20 times more than what they were originally offered for.
Well, and I only have one, and it was the one that I had given to my father. The first three that were cast. Bill Plum, who's a big-time Star Wars collector, came to me and wanted to cast one. I said, we got to cast three, one for me, one for you, Bill, and then one for my dad, because my dad was my inspiration in life. I mean, the reason why I can hold my head up high was my father's encouragement and my father's love. And the fact that that encouragement, that love, gave me one foot in love, and then the other foot I could stretch out as far as I could reach, because I always knew that I could come back home and be embraced. And that's huge. What we're talking about here is family, really. In the big picture, it's relationship, it's family. And family allows one to be themselves. It's the Jimmy, you and I were talking about that earlier. I just recently had one of my favorite members of my family, my cat Diesel, passed away this week.
Oh no! Oh,
and it was a tough thing. And you and I were talking, Jimmy, about what a a pet's passing means? Well, that unconditional love,
right?
That a family can have, that a pet gives on a daily basis, that we're all surrounded with, is what we retreat to, I hope. Because that's the true message. That's there for us to take and for us to understand and appreciate. Is like, geez, a little bit of love goes a whole long way to understanding. Understanding we're all in this together.
Do you have a similar connection then to your sculptures and other artwork? Do you bring it in as a member of the family almost?
I do. I invite them into my life in an inspirational way, and then I execute that invitation and manifest it through sculpture, and then I sit back with my fingers in my mouth, fretting that they're going to either have legs or they don't. Yoda has legs and then some, and if I'm ever remembered for anything in this life, that my legacy is Yoda. And you talked about him. You talked about the difference that he made to you, or the difference in that Yoda. That Yoda is particular to Lawrence Noble's vision of him. And I wanted to bring a heroicism to him. I wanted to bring wisdom in his eyes. When you look in his eyes, think about, because those are manifest in sculpture when everything works, and not always does it work, but it worked with this one, and I'm so proud of it. I hope, if anyone remembers Lawrence and they put Yoda in that same sentence, I'll be proud.
Well, let's get into a little bit about the history of the Yoda statue that we see outside of Lucasfilm at the Letterman Digital Arts Center in the Presidio Park in San Francisco. Also outside Big Rock Ranch, which is really not available to the public, currently the home of Skywalker Vineyards. And then there are a few other statues around. The ones I've seen is the park in San Anselmo that George Lucas actually donated the Yoda statue, and another one of your more iconic works, your life-size statue of Indiana Jones. And that's at the park in San Anselmo. And then the my favorite placement of the Yoda statue is the one that is currently residing in Rancho Obi-Wan. But let's go back to the beginning. And the original Yoda statue, which I believe was created for the Presidio Park complex when George moved Lucasfilm to San Francisco and created that fountain outside. And so they contacted you. And so what did they say? Can you make a bigger version of the little Yoda sculpture you made, the little bronze one? Can you make a bigger one? Is that what they asked you?
Well, I'll tell you exactly what happened, and it really didn't happen exactly that way. But so let me tell you how it happened. I was approached by a Star Wars collector, and he said, could you do a drawing or a painting of Yoda? Well, at the time, I had really decided to concentrate on sculpture. And I said, I'm not really doing paintings right now. Of course, right now I am. But then right now I wasn't doing it. And I said, but if you could get 5 people together, it's really possible that I could develop and produce a Yoda statue and you could each get one. Steve Sansweet was in on that original 5.
Of course he was.
Well, he hung up the phone. The collector hung up the phone. He says, I'll get back with you. Probably an hour later, he called me back and he says, I've got 5 people. And it was like, oh, really? So, and Steve Sansweet was one of those 5.
Yes.
So with the blessing of Steve, and I thought, well, they can't hurt me too much if I produce this piece without permission. And so I did. I said, but however, we're going to do 6 Yodas, and I want to give artist proof number 6 to George. And I got a little bit of pushback on that. Why not give him number 1? I said, do you really think George will not find out that there were 6 done? You know? And I said that no, number 6 goes to George with my good graces. And so we did it. And Steve, bless his heart, Steve set it up with Lucasfilm that I could actually meet George and give him number 6 artist proof.
Wow.
And I did. And George's first reaction to it, he said, this is Yoda from The Empire Strikes Back. And I said, exactly, Mr. Lucas. That's exactly what it is. And he loved it. What I didn't know, let's just cut to what I didn't know. George had been after licensing to produce bronzes. He wanted bronzes. Well, that's all Lawrence ever wanted to do was high-end bronzes for Lucasfilm. So after I gave him the statue, which went wonderfully well, he had a meeting with me with Casey Collins, who was the head of not licensing, but he was just under Howard Rothman, who was head of licensing. And Casey met with me right after I gave the statue to George. And I'm in Casey's office. I'm looking around at probably 1,000 products that they had produced through licensing. And I don't know why I said this, but I said, Casey, I'm not interested in producing product for you. There was a pause. He says, I know. And he said, what would you like to do? I said, well, you guys have companies and charities you'd like to give to. Why don't you produce a few of these and give them to those companies and then let them auction them off and raise money for their funds, for their individual causes? I said, how about this? We do 30 statues. Excuse me. We do 30 statues. For every 5 that we produce, we give you 1, which is a 25% deal or 20% deal. And he said, okay, that works. So that's how that deal got set. And so we sold out 30 statues. George got his. And George, and I can't answer for George, but he seemed to love it. Yes. And he put it in front of Big Rock Ranch. And then he sent me a photograph of it and a wonderful autograph statement underneath it. Lawrence, the force is with you. And it made my career. It was like, oh my God. And so I was so privileged and so honored.
So let me see if I can account for all 5. Let me see if I could account for all 5 you gave to George. One of them is in front of Lucasfilm at the Presidio Park. Another one is in the San Anselmo Park. The third one is at Big Rock Ranch. A fourth one is outside of the Lucasfilm Singapore headquarters, a building a.k.a. the Sandcrawler. And then there's a fifth one, which I think is probably in George's bathroom. I don't know.
No.
In his foyer, in his flower garden.
I think you have it right, but there were actually, think of it this way. There were 5 sculptures done originally. After the edition sold out, George came to me, and he wanted 5 more. So we did, of course, he's George Lucas. We said, of course. And so we did a little bit different edition of 5. And those went where you just said they went. There was one, you were missing one, and that went to Kathleen Kennedy's office.
Oh, I heard about that. Yes, there is one in her office at the Presidio as well. So if people, that's the chase selfie, because everyone does a selfie in front of the statue there that's open to the public in Presidio Park right outside LDAC.
Right.
But the tough selfie is the one to get in Kathleen Kennedy's office with the Yoda statue.
That's the tough one to get. I don't have one.
Yeah. Hey, where were you when you first presented the statue to George? Where did that happen?
I was at Skywalker Ranch.
Yes.
In the main living room of Skywalker Ranch. So I was set up. The Yoda was next to me. The foundry owner who cast the Yoda was also, Piero was next to me.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, Piero, you have to leave. And he goes, oh, man. So George walks in, and it was just George and I. And he looks at it and he says, this is the Yoda from Empire Strikes Back.
Yes.
And I said, and it's yours. Later, licensing, as every right they had to do, came to me and said, what'd you do with the profits, Lawrence?
Mm.
And there were, of course, cut to the sound of crickets. And that lasted for not long. And I said, you know what? I just gave the profits to you. I gave it to George. Because the profit of the job, which wasn't much other than developing it, there wasn't much profit, but the profit was the piece I cast to give to George.
Yeah.
And they said, never mind. Later I got flack, and I think for a justifiable reason. They said, well, every artist now is coming to us and wanting to give us stuff in return for privilege.
Mm.
But
you were there first. You were there first. So that's where the victor gets all the spoils in that situation, as far as I'm concerned. And you know what? It doesn't matter, because they already have their man. They already have their sculptor. If a lot of people talk about that Yoda statue there at Presidio Park, but if you poke around, you'll see other great Lawrence Noble sculptures. You have the brilliant sculpture of Willis O'Brien, the pioneer of movie special effects, the guy behind King Kong. You have a brilliant likeness of him with King Kong and the Empire State Building right there in the lobby at Lucasfilm, which is open to the public. And also you have some other artwork there in the park itself. And my hidden treasure at Lucasfilm is nobody ever talks about the Darth Vader bronze statue, but it's there. It's there at Lucasfilm. It's there's a little lobby close to the parking garage elevator that's just down the sidewalk there, and they have in the window there he is the Darth Vader. It's 4 feet tall, 150 pounds, and it's a brilliant Lawrence Noble original. And tell us a little bit about that. That's something that actually saw some limited sale commercially, but
it did through Dove Kellemer, who with Wade LaJose and others, we put that together and we were able to get the license to sell it, and also through Sideshow Collectibles, which bless their hearts, man. They've done some incredible work.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, in fact, I'm working on a project with them right now.
Really?
And it's actually another version of the life-size Yoda, but without the same base. So it's got a different base, and it's a different version. And right now we're in process of making 2 of them. One of which they're going to photograph and I hope I'm not saying anything out of line, but they're going to photograph and put out for market their life-size version of Yoda.
Wow!
And so that'll be a edition that people can get now. That it's the editions are all sold out. You don't want to do the same edition because that would really not be good for those who bought it. But establishing a new edition would be a different thing. So I did Darth Vader, and George liked it.
Yeah,
I mean,
of course he did.
Liked it.
It's brilliant.
I offered to change the patina, which is the surface coloration of it, because what I did artistically was I gave it a granite kind of look, because I actually like stone carving more than I like bronze, but I don't do stone carving. But my work kind of translates more to stone carving than it does to bronze. And so I chose to do this patina, and he seems to have liked it, and there are other pieces, as you say, the Edward Muybridge and the Philo Farnsworth, but the Willis O'Brien, oh my gosh. This is the story I've heard.
Yes.
So it's secondhand. But so Peter Jackson was at Lucasfilm at the Presidio, and he and George got lost. They weren't lost, but their handlers, the people that set up their appointments and stuff,
right?
They didn't know where George and Peter were.
Oh, they bolted.
They bolted.
Hey, Peter, let's ditch these losers.
And when they found them, they were in a storage room because George wanted to have, this is after we installed the Willis O'Brien piece. George says, great, I love it. Let's take it off the concrete background that it's on now, and let's raise it up, and I want to put a marble base under it. All of that's good, but in the meantime, they put the statue in a storage room. And so they looking for George, looking for Peter, and they find them, and they're both in a storage room looking at Willis. And then later, I get an email from Peter Jackson.
Wow.
Which is, I don't know how to tell you how honored I was by that, but they say, and Peter says, I just saw the Willis O'Brien statue and a photograph of it. And would it be tacky of me to ask for one for my private collection? And so I read that. I just went, oh my God, hand me a beer. And this is the time to celebrate, right?
Yes.
And so I'm on my third beer.
Yes.
When I showed it to my daughter, and she says, and because I was so excited that Peter Jackson actually wanted a photograph of that statue. That's my interpretation. And Casey, my daughter, looks at me and she says, duh, he wants a statue. And there was a pause that you would not believe. And so we created a statue. We cast another one with George's permission. We cast another one and sent it to New Zealand, and it's in Peter Jackson's private.
That's great.
I
never knew that. I never knew that. But people listening to the show, if you want to check out this amazing piece of artwork from Lawrence Noble, all you have to do is visit Lucasfilm at the Presidio Park, the Letterman Digital Arts Center, and the lobby is open to the public. You stand out front, you'll take your selfie with Larry's brilliant Yoda statue, but take a poke inside and look at that Willis O'Brien statue. And then what else do you have at the Presidio Park? I know you have at least one other piece.
Oh, my. That Willis O'Brien's probably my favorite piece.
Well, you know what's so cool is King Kong you sculpted King Kong climbing the Empire State Building. Probably one of the most iconic, probably top 5 most iconic images in cinema history has got to be King Kong on top of the world. On top, see, I keep say World Trade Center because of the 1976 remake.
Right.
I'm a kid of the 70s, but I actually have seen the original. That version from 1976. That was a terrible movie. Go check out the 1933 version of King Kong, the original, the real deal. Look for those special effects by Willis O'Brien, and then go to the Presidio and check out the amazing sculpture that Lawrence Noble did of Willis and the King himself.
Jimmy, think about there was the publicity still from the film, there was the actual footage from the film, and then there was the reality of what the Empire State Building looked like.
Mm-hmm.
So Lawrence had to differentiate, research, and find out, exactly what this looks like. But picture me on the phone. I'm talking with Patty Carlson, who was at Lucasfilm, who was giving me the job. And I'm on the phone. I'm going, okay, so what you want is a statue of Willis O'Brien, and then you want a 18-inch tall version of King Kong, and then you want the top 10 floors of the Empire State Building. And it was like, So, it's like, what is this claim? Okay, so we'll make it happen. And I made it happen. I built and fabricated. I'm a one-man shop.
Yes.
I don't turn over my work to any assistants or apprentices or anything. I do all the work myself.
And that's incredible because I've seen photos of you working in your studio or your shop, and you got the blowtorch, you got everything's going in there. It just seems like, usually when you think of an artiste, it's someone sitting down and very calmly and patiently working on their piece. But you're out there, you got the ovens going, you got the blowtorch, you got the what do you call that face protection?
I got whatever. I got my smock.
You got to have the smock. You're not going to go far without the smock.
Well, who knows who could drop in and they go, he's not an artist. He's not. Look, he doesn't even wear a smock. So, so I got that going for me. But it ain't easy. I mean, try fixing a kitchen sink. I mean, art is more than a kitchen sink. It's very, very involved. It requires the passion and commitment, the research, and the dog-mindedness just to bludgeon your way through it.
Perseverance, patience, and personality. Those are the 3 Ps I see in any Lawrence Noble work of art. And
that's
well, it's true, and I've known you for a long time, and I've seen all the great stuff that you create in Star Wars and beyond, and I'm forever impressed with your work, sir. Something I would like to talk about real quickly, because we're starting to run out of time here, Larry, and we'll have to have you back on to talk even more. Of course, if anyone wants to know more about the great artwork and life of Lawrence Noble, check out Star Wars Insider number 183 on stands now for this great 8-page spread in the magazine, Lawrence Noble Sculpting the Force. But just recently, Larry, we lost a great one. Burt Reynolds, what a superstar. And he is a guy who was a fan of yours and was known to collect some of your artwork. And I was wondering if you had any Burt Reynolds stories or encounters that you can share with us.
I do.
Yeah.
The bigger they are, the nicer they are.
Wow.
Peter Jackson, George Lucas, Nicholas Meyer, Burt Reynolds, as nice and respectful. And I don't know. I mean, I can tell you this. Burt Reynolds was at the top of his game, the #1 box office star when I met him. And he had seen a drawing I did of Steve McQueen in Steve's last movie, Tom Horn, The Legend of Tom Horn. And Burt said, get him on the picture. He told that to the marketing directors at Orion. And then next thing I know, I'm on the Paramount lot, and I'm waiting to meet Burt. Burt comes bounding out of his trailer, and I mean bounding, with his hand extended and reaching out to me, and he says, Larry Noble, he says, I've heard so much about you. It's such a pleasure to meet you. I'm sitting there slack-jawed. I mean slack-jawed. And he says, I understand you have some ideas for my picture, Sharky's Machine, which he produced, directed, and starred in. Come in the trailer and we'll talk. It's just Burt and me. And I'm looking around going, where's what? And so I went in, and he says, okay, so I have ideas, you have ideas. Tell me your idea. Crickets there. And then I go, well, Burt, Burt. So what I'm thinking is you behind the broken glass, and you've got this macho face, you've got this I'll take them all on kind of attitude. And I think you're holding up that big 45 long pistol or whatever you've got there, and you're showing yourself to be yourself. And he says, he slapped his hands together. He says, great, we'll go with that. I said, wait, hold on. I said, what about your ideas? He says, I like your idea better. Let's go. So I do it.
Wow.
And I'm heavily involved in the picture. But, sometimes the politics gets in the way. And I think, and I don't know, I can't answer for everything, but I think there were some people in marketing that said, Burt and Larry are just a little too close here. We need to be involved. So I was invited off the picture. And then a couple months later, Burt comes back on because it's a hot ticket. And he says, where's Noble? Oh, I love it, man. I love it. And so they call me. And then next thing I know, I'm at Paramount Studios. I'm in a soundstage, and Burt is testing Rachel Ward for, her co-starring role in the picture. The place is packed. Me and my photographer, which I was invited to bring, are against the back wall trying to blend with the construction. It's like, and then
trying to disappear.
Yeah.
Really. And then all of a sudden I hear, okay, that's a wrap. And I go, wow, okay, cool. And he goes, Larry Noble, where are you? And it's like, I'm called out. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So I come up and he says, you got your photographer? And Jay Aaron, who was the photographer. I said, yeah. He says, all right, this is my lighting director. And he introduced me to his lighting director. He says, Noble wants to do shots of me behind the glass. Let's give him Sharky. And so I said, Jay, let's set up. On the spot, right? Jay, let's set up. So we set up real fast, like within 30 seconds. And Burt is sitting in his chair, and he says, you want Sharky? I'll give you Sharky. Wow. He turns around, and then he turns back with the prop gun in his hand, and he's Sharky.
Wow.
It's like, oh, my God. And Jay, start shooting, pal. And Jay shot. And then we took photographs that were the basis of the drawing. Everything went swimmingly well. I gave the drawing to Burt. I said, you need to own the drawing. He invited me to his house.
Wow.
I go to his house in Beverly Hills.
Amazing.
I walk in. He says, would you like a beer? I said, I'd love a beer.
He gives you a course. He gives you a course, and you're like, that's all you got?
He hands me a cold course. He says, come on in with me. And he called me Old Bean. I don't know why he called me Old Bean.
Old Bean.
But it was so enduring. It was so endearing, I should use that word. It was so endearing. He says, come on in here, Old Bean. And so we walk into his game room, which is, the game room of a wild imagination. And he's got a photograph of John Wayne. I think it was in the Searchers, but it was John Wayne. And Burt had a beer. He hands me my beer, and he says, let's toast the master.
Wow.
And we both toasted that photo of John Wayne, one of my all-time favorite heroes. And he just looks at me, he says, well, that's John Wayne. And it's like, of course. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And so it was like, what do I say about that experience? Only that it happened to me, and I still pinch myself.
Unbelievable.
Because that was a class act. He was as special as Nicholas Meyer, as special as Peter Jackson, and certainly as, I don't know, maybe not. George Lucas has a special place in my heart for what he means to Lawrence. George has been my biggest patron. For someone to believe in you in order to just make my life better through his commissions and opportunities, he's made my life better. Together we won the Henry Herring Medal from the National Sculpture Society, which is a huge honor. I mean, it was given for outstanding collaboration between artist, architect, and owner on a project. Well, of course, the owner was George Lucas. The architect was the landscape artist, Lawrence Halprin, who designed the Franklin Roosevelt Memorial, among others, as far, and also the Presidio. And then the other Lawrence. I was the other Lawrence.
It was George, Larry, and Larry.
Right.
Like DeLarry, Daryl, and Daryl.
And they said, well, we're going to present this to you in New York at the Century Club, built 1840 in Midtown Manhattan. And I went, my wife Libby went, and we had lunch with George.
Wow.
And then got up to speak, and we talked about our involvement together on my body of work, the Yoda fountain, and this is what this award was for. The Yoda fountain, the Willis O'Brien statue, the Edward Muybridge statue, and the Philo Farnsworth statue. And that's what it was, my whole body of work at Lucasfilm. And they said, here's the medal. George, you and Lawrence talk about this. George gets up, starts talking. He says, and I heard Lawrence, wonderful stuff. And then he says, Lawrence, why don't you, give him your side of it? And I said, well, this is all about fluidity. And really, if you're going to talk about how do you become successfully creative, if you don't have a fluid nature to recognize what might be improved, what could be improved along the way to make the end result something special. I can't tell you what it meant to me. It's the highlight of my career. And you just hit on two of them, Burt Reynolds and George Lucas. They believed in some little artist from Texas, who fancied themselves an artist
Nothing little comes from Texas, and of course they believe you because talent. Well, but just thinking about what a full circle moment that must have been for you, Larry, from seeing Star Wars: A New Hope back in 1977 in New York to then all of a sudden being in California and standing there, with George Lucas, the man that inspired you all those years before. I mean, that's just an amazing moment in a career that has spanned so many years, and you've had so many brushes with notable folks. What a brilliant capstone to your work there with Lucasfilm.
I believe in myself. We're good, bad, or indifferent. I've made mistakes. On every job that I wish I could kind of take back or change or alter and amend. But at the same time, I've been given opportunities that come to very few. But the few that it comes to are those that accept their destiny. And like Luke Skywalker, I accepted my destiny. I was there when the opportunity came to grab it and say, this is mine. And if there's a message in there for your listeners,
yes,
our family, our greater family, if there's a message in there, you know what? You do what your passion tells you to do. And you let the rest up to somebody with a higher pay grade than you. Just pursue it. Pursue it to the best. I've never not given my best. Is the best not good enough sometimes? Yes. First to admit it. But when the best works, oh my God, Katie, bar the door. Because I'm one grateful human being. I do want to mention a couple of things. One, my website.
Yes.
If you want artwork from Lawrence Noble, contact me. I will sell it to you. I won't give it to you, but I will sell it.
Nice.
And I'm available through my website, through email. And then also you could, if you want, and this is really a plug, if you want to buy the book, The Entertainment Art of Lawrence Noble, it's been available for a while. But it's also still available through my publisher, Stan Stice, and Dreams and Visions Press. Ask Paul Bateman about Stan.
Oh, we know all about Stan. Stanley's he's one of our favorites. We've known him as long as we've known you. So we've gone out and had dinner together. You, me, and Stan, and John, and everyone. So all part of the big family.
Don't forget Paul.
Well, we never forget Paul.
How small of a community it really is. When you get together with fellow Star Wars fans, you realize these people love the same thing I love. These people are there because for the same reason that I'm there, and George produced the vision. He's out there. He's made an impact in 20th century and 21st century art. And that's without George, we wouldn't have this conversation.
Right.
It wouldn't be happening. I mean, I appreciate more than you can imagine an opportunity to speak passionately about something I've devoted my entire life to.
Yes.
Thank you both, Jason and Jimmy. I mean, you guys are the cat's meow, as they say.
Well, we love you, Larry. I have one last question for you. One final question. I've never asked you about this before. Is it true that when you were prepping the Yoda statue, Lucasfilm actually sent you a Yoda puppet to study?
They did.
And it was like a screen. It was a screen used, actual real deal. A puppet that Frank Oz had his hand up into, and you had it in your possession, right?
I did.
So my question is this: what did you make Yoda say that he shouldn't have said?
What did I make? I'm alive. I'm alive. And to tell you the truth, I thought the Yoda puppet was fine. But I really love Frank Oz's version of Yoda. And without Frank Oz in there, it was just a puppet.
Yeah, so there's something missing, right?
There's something missing. There are a couple of things missing. One is the intuitive acting ability that Frank brought to it, the voice, everything. But there was also the lighting. You know, when you photograph something, they say, well, you look like you gained 10 pounds. Well, that's what happened with the puppet. The puppet in The Empire Strikes Back was a caricature. And what I had understood, and I could be wrong here, is that George was very concerned when he saw the puppet that it would not read the way he wanted. But then when he saw Frank Oz operating the puppet in a lighting environment that gave weight and resonance to that puppet, he was like relieved.
Yeah.
And that's what I was trying to capture. Not the puppet. The puppet is the shell that we all wear. You know, it's even Michelangelo's David wore a shell. But what Michelangelo was able, and I'm not Michelangelo, but what Michelangelo was able to do was bring life inside and within that shell that translated and manifested into a greater reality. That was my motive. That was my inspiration, and that was my directive in sculpting Yoda. It's like, I want to see the character I saw through my filters on screen. I want to see that one. I don't want a puppet is like you could hang that in a rack at Western Costume. I want to see the Yoda, the character, the result of Frank Oz, the result of George's vision. You know, that's what I want to sculpt.
Well,
and that's what I said about doing.
Well, I think you did. And much like how Frank brought life to that puppet, you brought life to Yoda just with the sculpture itself. It's a permanent, almost an affirmation of the reality of Yoda that we feel as fans, because it's something we can go see in 3 dimensions, and it's there right in front of us, and it's real. Your Yoda is as real to me as the Yoda I see on screen. And I know you're not Michelangelo, as you said, Larry, but I was just wondering if you had his phone number, because we want to talk to him next week.
Oh, sure. Let me give it to you.
Just text it to me, okay?
555
Michelangelo
312-5732.
That's
ask for me, and or leave a message.
Well, Larry, thank you so much for spending the time with us tonight. Really appreciate it. The article is wonderful. It is in this latest issue of Star Wars Insider. It's available right now on newsstands, so snatch it up while you can. And we just appreciate your friendship and your talent, and love to talk to you again sometime soon.
Jason, Jimmy, you guys, you're very dear to me. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to really those who are dear to all of us, the 3 of us.
Yeah.
And that's the fame.
That's right.
Thank you for because a piece is only as good as the people who accept and embrace it. And see Yoda accepted and embraced is priceless. I can't speak for my wife, for my family, for myself any more than that. It's like I go to see the Yoda fountain just to see people's reaction when they go up and see it. They don't know who I am. I don't know who they are, but we both know who Yoda is. And
yes. Well
that's
said.
special.
Absolutely.
So
Well, thank you so
All right.
much, my friend. It's been great to get caught up with you. And again, the place for all things Lawrence Noble is lawrencenoble.com. That's Noble, NOBLE.com. And go over there and commission Mr. Noble to create you something really cool. And if that you're not in the market for that, go check out some photographs of his amazing artwork and read his bio and learn more about this incredible guy we are so lucky to call a friend of ours here at Rebel Force Radio. Larry, have a great night.
You too. You guys have a wonderful night. Have a Coors on me.
Yes.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care.